Hi, I am Brandy Bugni. I'm the literacy manager at the Michigan Department of Education, and I'm really just stepping in shortly to be able to give you an MDE welcome. And our literacy team is so happy and excited to have been able to work with MDE, or the Michigan's MTSS TA Center, to work on this session of the symposium and other sessions as well. Our team's been working with, our literacy team's been working with the center on lots of literacy supports over the last couple of years. And while today's session on high leverage instruction isn't just about literacy, it's geared for all students learning in all the subjects, our team's happy to have been able to support, and Katie's doing such a nice job moderating. So we're all proud of her too. And as we're carefully considering students' experiences, we know that engaging literacy instruction in any learning modes essential to their success. Just like Anita said, effective, engaging instruction is what leads to students learning. And so we are happy to know that this connects with our MDE strategic plan to support effective, equitable learning environments for all students, and that Anita's strategies really stretch across all grade levels and content areas, about explicit instruction and the feedback and the opportunities to respond, and that's going to really be helpful as we go into some uncertainty with lots of different kinds of learning for students in person and virtually. And so the imperative moral statement for MDE, Anita said we should always have these, is that Michigan must ensure that each and every child can read and do math, be a creative thinker and a problem solver, and be an informed, open-minded, and engaged citizen in our society. This process begins in Michigan's classrooms with all of you, and students need to be given multiple opportunities to be actively engaged in every classroom every day. So I will send it back over to Kathy.
Thank you so much, Brandy, for kicking off the second part of our webinar. The TA Center appreciates the collaboration and partnership with both you and your team. I am Kathy Place, and I am joining you from the Upper Peninsula. My colleague, Nicole Coleman, will be co-facilitating the second half of the webinar with me, and Nicole joins us from the Kalamazoo area. The rest of our team will continue to monitor that Q&A box. And while we won't be able to answer all of your questions, we will make sure today during the session, we will make sure that we get those responses out to you in a follow-up email. So our time with Dr. Archer this afternoon may have affirmed practices for you. It may have reminded you of strategies that you need to consider, or it may have really helped you expand your application of explicit instruction strategies. Wherever you are in that journey, there is always something to learn and improve. Dr. Archer unpacked that explicit instruction includes the content of what we teach, the design of our instruction, the delivery of that instruction, and the practice opportunities that we provide for our students. If we do nothing else, if we chose one thing to focus on, and we focused in that delivery section on increasing student engagement through opportunities to respond while providing feedback as they respond, we will have a positive impact on student learning. We get a huge bang for our buck as there's nothing new to purchase. These are strategies that we can embed into the delivery of materials that we already have. In other words, budget friendly with a tremendous impact. And we know, and Dr. Archer really acknowledged that we had that pivot to remote instruction, and that caused every single educator to rethink how we deliver instruction and how we engage our students in that remote setting. So given these things, our team really thought that opportunities to respond would be a really great place to spend the rest of our time together and reflect on our current practices and focus on strengthening what we're doing, whether that is going to be in a physical classroom or whether it's virtual. And Dr. Archer reminded us that opportunities to respond fit into every part of our lesson. So think of that one slide. When you do look at your PowerPoint, it's slide 42. And she really outlined that in that first part of the lesson, that review and preview fits into the opening. that during the body of our lesson, the I do, the we do, the you do, those should be full of opportunities to respond. And then that ever important closing of our lesson, the review and the preview and independent work, all of that should include opportunities to respond. For many of us, it might be difficult to think about where to start and the practical value of investing the time and effort. So you could hear from our team for the next 45 minutes, but we really thought that it would be better for us to tap into some expert teachers and administrators from around Michigan who have taken the time to change the way they deliver instruction so that active participation is evident every day, so that student engagement is increased every moment. So we will hear from them regarding their journey to change their instructional practices to benefit all students. We asked them to share their experiences. We asked each of these educators to respond to the same questions, such as describing engagement strategies that they found to be effective, and especially strategies that were effective for students who are struggling with learning. We asked them to share some advice. So as we move forward with this, we know Dr. Archer identified several reasons why active participation is important and why it's important to consider during planning our instruction. She mentioned increasing on-task behavior, increasing accountability, increasing achievement. So before we hear from our teachers, I know I was like you, I have my best practices sheet. Mine is filled on the front and the back just from the time with Dr. Archer. So if yours isn't filled on the back, turn it over to the back or pull yourself out a new sheet of paper because we're going to expect you to be active in participating during this part of the presentation as well. So I'm going to trust that you have a piece of paper, and I'm going to ask you to, on that piece of paper, think for a moment about your why. Why is active participation important for you as a teacher? Why is it important to get your students engaged and actively participating? I'm going to give you about 10 seconds for that write, and you can start writing now. All right, give me a virtual thumbs up if you have a why written. I'm going to trust that you've got that thumbs up and you have your why. Before I start the first video, I want to do a little pre-correct. We have these videos loaded into Zoom, and there may be a little bit of a delay between the audio and the video. Please don't let that delay, if it's there, distract you from the message. We made sure that the audio is clear, and that's where the important message is. So don't let any delay in that distract you. And I'm going to set you up. As you listen to these teachers talk about why active participation is important to them, reflect on what you wrote, okay? And it may affirm or confirm the things you have written, or if you hear something that resonates with you, you might add to your why, okay?
I would say most definitely, the hands down most effective practice is use of active participation strategies. It gives students lots of opportunity to process information, to practice retrieving information from their brain and recalling it and communicate it back to me. And so it's this ongoing process of formative assessment during instruction. And I find active participation strategies really give me the most bang for my buck. I really kind of think of teaching as a dance, right? So I do something, and then the way the student responds back to me determines my next move. So I ask a question to the group, they give a response in some form, and then that informs me their level of understanding, how confidently they responded. I can lean in on who didn't respond or who maybe was kind of looking around and waiting to hear what others were saying before they responded, and if need be, ask that same prompt again to give everyone a chance to be successful.
For me, I would say it's definitely a combination of choral responses and partner work, and even within that partner work, response slates, like the whiteboards. I use these throughout my lessons, throughout my day. mainly because they're consistent. They serve the purpose of active participation. Everyone does it. Everyone can be held accountable. And for me, the most important is that it gives me feedback as the teacher. It tells me if they are learning or not. We know that we need to make learning visible so that we can respond to it. So having these active participation strategies in place lets me know if I need to adjust the lesson. Do I need to slow down? Do I need to reteach a concept? And so it helps me just know if what I'm doing is working or not.
I think that's one of the big things that I've seen is it doesn't matter if you're dealing with students with disabilities, or you're working in an honors classroom, or anywhere in between. The strategies work for all kids.
Several of our teachers really identified that formative assessment as one of the purposes of active participation. We often think of formative assessment as separate from instruction, or that assessment is something that happens at the end of instruction or after instruction. But here, we really heard our teachers describing it as more of an interaction that happens throughout instruction. As Renee Samuel said, it is like a dance. Instruction is, I say something, you say something. I write something, you write something. And we make adjustments as needed.
You're absolutely right, Kathy. And I really like what Alicia Daughtry mentioned when she said that the use of the active engagement strategies helps to inform her instruction because they make learning visible. We know that with the use of the active engagement strategies, it allows the teacher to reflect in real time and make those modifications and adjustments to their instruction based upon what the students are telling them. It helps us to evaluate how effective that instruction is and allows us to make those adjustments in order to provide feedback, whether it's praise, encouragement, which we definitely want to provide so much of as we move into this upcoming school year, as well as the corrections so that our students are moving in the right direction as they continue with their learning. So as we think about the awesome presentation that Dr. Archer gave us today, and I just truly appreciate what she shared, she spoke about many things, and we're zooming our time today in on active participation. She spoke about these procedures which fall into 3 buckets, and they are verbal responses, we have written responses, and we also have action responses. So the teachers that we interviewed today identified a number of strategies that they use daily within their classroom instruction, including things like partner sharing. And that's a great strategy to use when students are given a task and they have a number of correct responses that they could give. We also have strategies such as the use of hand gestures, where you may have students use a fist to 5 to show their personal rating of something, or maybe they agree or disagree, or possibly even just a basic yes or no response. Lastly, we have those written responses where students will use a slate or a whiteboard where they're showing their response or they're thinking about a response before answering out loud. What we're going to provide you with is another opportunity to hear from our teachers as they discuss various forms of active engagement, beginning with partner sharing. And while they are providing their input on what they do in the classrooms, I want you to think about maybe practices that you've used over the last year that you already know you will continue in this upcoming school year, be it face-to-face or virtual, or maybe something that you may even want to share with someone else that is beginning the new year with you. In addition to that, just to stretch your thinking, what I'd love to have you do is listen in on strategies maybe that you haven't considered or you're not as familiar with, and note that in order to consider maybe incorporating that sometime throughout the course of the school year.
Are going to, and then I have them do something, and then I will later on say choose, you are going to, and I really just sets it up so that both students in the partnership are involved. So everyone participating, everyone practicing, providing many opportunities to practice the skills that we want them to learn, and again, holding everyone accountable.
Well, I'm thinking of a student I had this year who was very quiet, and she had a very hard time. I noticed when I first had her, she would not speak up in class, and she had some ideas, I could tell, but she was terrified to share them. And so in a smaller group, she was eventually able to start sharing her thoughts, because it was less scary than in a full classroom where you traditionally raise your hand with 28 people and make a comment in front of 28 people. It's a lot easier to say your opinion to 3 people.
Things that I find work really well with them are if they also have the opportunity to do that partner reading, or they have the opportunity to share their responses with somebody before they share it out in front of the group, even if it's that small setting. If they're shaky, or if they're uncomfortable, or they're nervous, or they're self-conscious, they want that opportunity to be able to think through what their answer is going to be, maybe get a little bit of feedback if they need it, or to practice it before they have to do it in front of anybody else.
Alicia, Robin, and Carla all spoke to the fact that partner sharing helps all learners. It helps them to not only engage, but to build their confidence as well as their competence in what they're learning, so that they can successfully complete the task at hand. Practice, especially within a small setting such as partner sharing, can be powerful. Let's listen to our teachers as they discuss some other strategies that they use, including hand signals and whiteboards.
In my classroom, I used a lot of hand signals, mostly thumbs up, thumbs down. I also tried to incorporate a little bit into our remote learning when we were doing trivia. But as an example, I would have a class starter before we went to remote learning. We were learning about commas and the comma rules. And I would have a sentence on the whiteboard where the students would come up to the whiteboard with the comma and press stop. And they would turn to the student audience and receive feedback from their peers, whether it was a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
So the strategy that I learned and love to use are, we use a lot of whiteboards or slates in my classroom, and I really appreciate it because I can, literally see their thinking. When they're drawing something or they're creating an organizational chart or they're answering a question, I can see how that math problem is worked out. I can see how that social studies idea came to be. I can see their timeline, and I'm walking around and I get to see right over their shoulder, and it's easy to share with a partner. It's easy to hold up and share with me. It was such a great strategy. I think that's the one that I use the most.
And correct me if I'm wrong, teaching in Corona, there are no interactive whiteboards that you don't have a smart board, things like that.
Unfortunately, no. Nope. So we're using, we're using our individual whiteboards and our lovely socks from home to erase. We're loving it.
We're hearing from our teachers that ongoing importance of making learning visible and that ongoing formative assessment. And as Mike reminded us, this does not have to be high tech. As he said, they're loving their individual whiteboards and their socks from home. And as Anita reminded us, in that virtual setting, this could be a plate, a mirror, or simply a piece of paper. Let's now hear from some additional teachers and some other options for verbal responses, including choral responding and whisper reading.
So with choral responding, just overall, it increases that student engagement, that student accountability for their learning. So everybody's involved in the learning throughout the day. Rather than just 1 or 2 students. So really just increases that student ownership, but also hearing everybody respond also allows me to provide that corrective feedback to students. I'm also able to kind of hear their responses, adjust my teaching according to how they respond as well. So
Yeah, typically I use choral reading every single day. I do a lot of partner reads, whisper reads, and I do some closed reading as well. So I use what's called a whisper read, and the students are all reading at the same time to themselves. Mouths are moving, eyes are on the paper, and I'm walking around, and I'll just gently put my hand on their shoulder, and then they elevate their voice just a little bit so that I can hear them and where they're at. But this gives the kids a chance to read by themselves, to work through some of the words, and use some of their strategies that they need. And so I use that initially when we first read a text together, and then we chorally read.
These are some wonderful examples of different engagement strategies. As Nicole prompted you as we started that series of video clips, she prompted you to think about, is there a strategy that you're comfortable with, that you know you're going to continue? Or maybe you took some notes about one that you know you need to expand your application on. So reflect on some of those notes. I get so excited every time I watch these interviews and I hear about the implementation and I hear that enthusiasm in these teachers' voices. Kate Smith shared about whisper reading. This is a great alternative to silent reading or round robin reading. It is a strategy that includes all learners, and as Kate said, all mouths are moving, all eyes are on the page, and it provides that opportunity for all of her students to practice their critical reading skills, not just one student. So with these strategies, not only do we see academic benefits when we increase active participation, but we also impact classroom management and culture, as well as social emotional well-being of our students. The first two webinars in this series of supporting educators with that return to school, the first two webinars focused on effective environments and social emotional learning. And in both of those webinars, they highlighted three critical pieces. They highlighted creating environments, creating classroom and school environments that are positive, predictable, and safe. Active participation strategies can help you create that environment. One of Dr. Archer's Anita-isms is avoid the void, for they will fill it. This is critical as we return to school, and we must maximize every single moment with our students. We're also going to have students, either in our virtual classrooms or in our face-to-face instruction, that have faced the same uncertainty we have. They may be returning with fear. They may have experienced loss. So let's hear from some of our teachers about how incorporating these active engagement strategies can make a difference and provide benefits well beyond even academics.
What you find when everyone is engaged and tuned in and actively doing something, not passively sitting and listening, but they're doing something, there's no opportunity to get off task. There's no two kids sitting in the corner that can be whispering while everyone's expected to respond, right? So there's just less opportunity to get into mischief.
You know, we talk about time, and if they're using their time, if you're filling their time with something they're supposed to be doing, then they don't have time to do anything else. So that, you know, idle hands are the devil's workshop, and if their hands are not idle because you're giving them something, it's, you know, it's a fast-paced go, 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 respond, listen, talk to each other, confer, develop, you know, reflect and present. There's no time to screw around.
Continue to let them know you're important, build that relationship. You have a voice, I want to hear that voice, and so does the class. And so, you know, to me, it's non-negotiable that you participate in class because you're too important to me. And so I just make sure that they know that. I'm sure you're going to have your moments where kids are, something major has happened in their life and they've fallen apart. But, you know, our job is to pick them back up and help them. And through the use of these consistent strategies, they know what's expected. And so some of my kids have come in some pretty foul moods, but they know what's expected and they know what we're going to do here, and they're able to do it, and it almost sort of eases some of whatever tension or anxiety they had elsewhere because these things have been established and we just do them every day.
Establishing structure, safety, and consistency helps to foster strong classroom management and increases the likelihood of student success. And our teachers message that so well. So as you continue to think about the active engagement strategies that we've discussed so far in this webinar, I want you to think about your teaching, if it's going to be virtual or in the classroom, noting that as you're moving forward, you're going to change your behavior. And in order to make that something that actually happens and not fall back into habit, you need to have some type of plan. People don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. So we want you to think about how you can move forward with actually making this a reality and not just something that you think is a good idea, but you fall back into your routine. Hopefully you'll have support from your colleagues, maybe others that are watching this webinar with you. You can have some conversation, or you may have conversations during your grade level meetings or department meetings so that this remains something in the forefront of your mind. Whatever it is, we want you to move forward with implementing this practice so that you can increase the strength of your instruction. What we want you to do now is listen to the advice that's going to be provided by those teachers that you've seen during the previous clips as they give insight on how to move forward in implementation of active engagement strategies. And while you're listening, just note some of the advice that's being given so that you can move forward in your implementation.
Just start small, come up with, your hand signal or your signal that you want to use, keep your language consistent, and, practice that until it just becomes second nature for you. And then you can start to layer in and add more pieces to that puzzle.
I would suggest making a list of those effective strategies for active engagement. I would then look at my upcoming lessons, look at my teacher's manual, look at my curriculum, and see how can I incorporate those strategies into what I'm already doing. And it may just be where you incorporate one. Start off with one. Choose one that you think, I want to somehow get this into my lessons. Start with that. As you start to get more comfortable with that, add in another one. Ask yourself, are my students, when you're looking at your lesson, are my students able to respond numerous times throughout the lesson? Am I providing multiple chances to practice a skill and respond?
Feel free to ask questions, seek out active engagement strategies, and give it that time. It's not going to be one day you introduce it and then kids all have it the next day. For a week, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, whatever it takes, stick with it, stay with the routine, your kids will get there.
Like, I learned these methods on the job and not right away. So, I was 10 years in before I learned a lot of these things, and I know that they're right. I know that's the right way to do it. I was calling on kids that raised their hand. That was my method because that's what I did. And I thought that was the best way. And then, of course, you and I both know that the kid that raises their hand has the correct answer. So you're just hearing the correct answer and you're feeling great about yourself as a teacher, and it's, but that's not what we're trying to do. We want to hear the incorrect answers. We want to draw sticks. We want to do things that create discomfort because learning is uncomfortable.
I love all of those pieces of advice. Hopefully you were able to write down one or two things that you can do right away to incorporate these strategies into your lesson delivery. If it has seemed overwhelming in the past, think about the advice that some of these teachers brought forth. We heard start small, even pick one strategy. Alicia reminded us how critical it is to look in your teacher's manual, whether you look forward in a whole week's lessons or review that lesson prior that's coming up the next day. It is really important to review your teacher guides to make sure that the lessons are not all teacher talk, but that they have ample opportunities for student responses, and you can plan where you can insert those responses in there. So in other words, be planful. Nicole mentioned having a plan is critical. So be planful, but get started. You will get better over time. Making this kind of change is facilitated by effective leadership. leadership that will support teaming, leadership that will support training, coaching, and the use of data in an ongoing way. So we also asked administrators some questions about how they accomplished this work in a school-wide setting. So we're going to have you listen to those, and as you listen to these, think about how this work could be supported, whether you're an administrator or whether you are part of a teaching team. How can you support at the level you are back in your district or your building?
The most important aspect from a system is that you have a team of people who are trained and focused on implementing these strategies with fidelity. Choosing your core team of people to start slowly with is critical. I think everyone knows who their champions are in the building, and those are the people that you need to start with. Getting buy-in from those individuals, the informal leaders within your building, that has a big impact. That's where we started, and we started with one cohort, and over time we started adding one more person from each department until we had everyone trained in these strategies. So I think starting slowly is important. I think celebrating the small victories along the way is important.
Our teacher leaders meet together. They make a plan each school year for which teachers they're each going to coach, and everybody gets coached, whether you're a master teacher or a new teacher coming in. And if you use research, that helps teachers from the beginning understand that they might need to change some of the things that they're doing. I think that was super important in the beginning, and it was very eye-opening for our teachers to look at the research about what instructional practices got the best results, and to realize they weren't always using those things. And if we focused on a few of those things, we could make a big difference in what students learned and how much they were engaged with us during the day.
Travis and Angela just alluded to the fact of the importance as leaders of their building to provide support for their staff as they move forward with implementing active engagement strategies. Providing that support increases the likelihood of those practices really beginning to stick and to become part of the culture within the building. When the whole school is really focused on the same thing and moving in the same direction to increase active engagement or whatever a school may be implementing overall, the results are powerful. We're going to listen a little bit more from our administrators.
I was a teacher, so I understand this personally, but get burned out when there's a new initiative every year, or this year focuses this. And sometimes it seems like administrators feel like they have to do that, like that's what we do. But I think if you can pick those things that are most important, active participation and instructional routines and things like that, and continue to build everyone's understanding and their implementation over time, that's when you get this synergy effect where, the teachers get so excited about it and they love helping each other, and it becomes something that can be very, very impactful.
The implementation of the strategies that we put in at North have been impactful. And I'm not just saying that to say that, we have data to support that. When we started this, we were a focus school, just because of our top 30 and our bottom 30 being so far apart with achievement gaps. That gap is closed significantly. We're outperforming a lot of schools who traditionally we hadn't been outperforming, and I would attribute that solely to what we've done instructionally within the building.
What we want you to hear from our administrators and from what has been messaged all throughout our time together today is that the change of practice or strengthening practices maybe that you already have occurring within your instruction is well worth the work that it takes in order to make it a reality. So don't abandon the practices as you move forward with them prematurely, because you may miss out on seeing wonderful effects if you just stay the course. So as we're moving forward in the home stretch of this presentation, we want to provide you with something that we think will help you in your process moving forward. Teaching is a set of behaviors that over time can become automatic, as I alluded to before. So we wanted to give you a document that would allow you to really track what you're doing and notice areas where you're doing well, or maybe areas that you want to focus on as you move forward with installing the practices. So you'll see on the screen that we have a document called a planning template that will allow you to note the goal maybe that you're establishing for yourself and moving forward with installing active engagement strategies. It also identifies what strategy you're going to focus on and the steps that you're going to take in moving forward with installing this particular practice. Overall, this is a document that will help you to note your progress, and it will enable you to have great conversations with your colleagues as you move forward collectively in installing active engagement within your classroom instruction.
Like you, we have been inundated with resources, with materials, with papers, with webinars, with other offerings, all with the great intentions of being helpful during these changing times. But in many cases, it has actually just been overwhelming simply due to the volume of resources. And this can include resources on explicit instruction and active participation or engagement. So what our team did, along with Dr. Archer, is we reviewed many of the resources that are out there on explicit instruction and recreated a short list for you. And so what will come out in the follow-up email will be a list of 3 resources for explicit instruction, 3 that are around opportunities to respond, and 3 focusing on judicious practice. When we did our review, our criteria were looking at resources that were high quality. We wanted them based in solid evidence. We wanted resources to share with you that were practical and user-friendly. In short, we really wanted things that you could read, that are readable right now, and that you could apply the learning right away. And we wanted to ensure that they were high quality. So again, this link to a list of resources will come out to you in the follow-up email. We also want to draw your attention to our to the Michigan's MTSS TA Center website, and on that website we have a link to a COVID-19 resources page, and there are several categories from that page. But we've really been working since this pivot to online learning and school shutdowns and the whole response to the pandemic. As a TA center, we have been working to provide supports to educators. So we really want you to know that there's a wealth of information there for you. We also want to acknowledge that we know that my colleagues have been watching the Q&A box, and we know that questions come in. These are days where we often have more questions than we have answers. But know that we are monitoring that question box, and what we're going to do is our team, along with Dr. Archer, we will review your questions. We will ensure that all of them are answered, and that transcript will be shared out with you again in that follow-up email. So as we wrap up our time together, I want you to pull out that best practices list that you started during your time with Dr. Archer. So I've got mine, pull yours out. I told Dr. Archer I have a whole file folder full of 10, 15 years of best practices sheets from her, and they are the most valuable notes from any trainings. I love to look back at them. So what I want you to do right now is look at your list of best practices that you wrote with that time, during that time with Anita. And I want you to, she had you write down one in the Q&A box, but I want you to highlight one. Highlight one that resonates with you, that you don't want to forget. Because I know what's gonna happen when it gets closer to kids coming to school or into your virtual settings. We get busy and we forget things. So highlight one of those best practices that you do not want to forget. During our time together, Nicole and I asked you to think about several things. We asked you to write down your why, and we asked you to add to that as you heard the why from other teachers. Don't forget why this work is important. Don't forget why ensuring that your students are actively engaged in their learning. You know, don't forget that. So keep that why close to you. Nicole prompted you to think about strategies, strategies that you are comfortable with, strategies that you aren't so comfortable with. So make sure that you are ready to embed these strategies into your delivery of instruction. And please make use of that action plan. We tried to make it simple. It will come out in your resources and be available for you. The bottom line is don't forget your learning today. Put this learning into action. We would like to take a moment to thank the teachers and the administrators who shared their time and shared their stories with us through the videos. We were overwhelmed with their willingness to participate. We were overwhelmed with their knowledge and their enthusiasm. And so we'll work to further use those as resources. And finally, we would like to thank all of you. We would like to thank all of you for taking the time from your summer vacation to learn with us today. This is a challenging time for all of us, and particularly so for educators. We are in the midst of a pandemic, and what our day-to-day work looks like is still uncertain. I see emails and plans that what the plan looks like today might not be what the plan looks like on Monday. So we are really in uncertain times. But what we do know is something that Dr. Archer outlined at the very beginning of her time with us. What we do know is that good instruction is good instruction is good instruction. And that learning, student learning, is our ultimate goal. So whether that instruction and learning are happening face-to-face, remote, or in some hybrid form, we know that it can happen. Teachers rose to the occasion in March, and we know that you will do so again for our students and for our families. So we ask that you take care of yourselves, and we would like to leave you with one parting thought from one of our teachers.
Teaching is a work in progress. It always is. That's the best part about it. You know, we're constantly evolving, and next year I'll be better than I was this year. And, you know, who knew we were going to be in the middle of a pandemic? But now that we've done it, we can do this. Teachers can do anything. I really believe that.
And there you go. Teachers can do anything. Again, we'd like to thank you for your time. And when you do exit Zoom today, you will be prompted to complete a brief survey. Please take the time to complete that because your input is really appreciated. So, thank you.